Hey guys, and welcome back inside the castle grounds here at the Palace Castle for another episode of Historia Mystoria. Today we're going to continue taking a look at the early settlements here in the New World as we take a look at the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims, a story that you've probably been hearing ever since you were in elementary school, but we're going to take it a little step further and talk about who those people really were, why they were coming here, and the struggles they had once they actually arrived and settled. So enjoy this episode, and I'm going to go out here to the stables and enjoy a horse ride for the rest of my day. Enjoy. All right, guys, we're going to take a look today at the Pilgrims. But to be honest with you, Pilgrims is not a name that we really should be giving to these settlers. That was the name that we gave them a little bit after. They were actually known as the Separatists, and mostly because they separated from the Church of England. They were looking for the freedom to worship the way that they wanted to, that they were the ones who didn't really believe in what the Church of England was going in the direction that it was going. And because of that, they're going to actually leave the church, which made them obviously have to leave England as well. And so these settlers that we know as the Pilgrims are going to start their journey from England and go actually down to Holland, the Dutch nation of Holland. This happened in 1607, around the same time that we know that Jamestown was being erected here in the New World. Now, as the Separatists moved to Holland in order to worship freely, they also realized that, hey, maybe they could also go to the New World and just be able to worship how they chose in this new land. We know that there weren't any laws here. There wasn't a country per se. People were just getting there and starting the settlement. But the issue was they wanted to go there, but they didn't have the money. They were not an elite class. They did not have the means necessary to go. They didn't have a ship. They didn't have anybody to take them. And so they were kind of stuck here in Holland to worship as they chose for now. Now, they're going to go to England, and they're going to go to the Virginia Company, and they're going to ask for a charter in which they receive, because they know that, again, England is still trying to get permanent settlements here in the New World to gain the outstandingness that they need for their empire. Of course, they're trying to become the best empire in the world. Now, in 1620, so notice it took 13 years for them to receive this charter. Now, this is the second time in our lessons that we've heard the word charter. You'll notice that I have it bold here for you. What exactly is a charter? Well, a charter is a legal document that gives certain rights to a person or a company. And so in this case, they were given a charter that was giving these people land. They were able to go there, to settle on it, to use the land as they chose fit, as long as it was in the name of, in this case, the King and the Church of England. Now, I know that they were separating, but again, they were doing this because they didn't have any money. They had to go to the king, they had to go to the Virginia Company to get this charter to be able to go to the New World and be able to set up a settlement like they want to. Now, the big thing we talked about before was they didn't have any way to get there. Well, they're going to meet a man by the name of Myles Standish, a British naval officer who happened to be stationed in Holland. And he too had the good idea that he wanted to go to the New World as well. And so it was kind of match made in heaven here for these two groups, or this one man and the group of Dutch settlers. And they hired him to accompany them to America and to serve as their military captain. Now, they weren't for sure that Myles Standish was actually going to stay there or become part of them or become, integrated into their settlement once they got to where they were going. But they were hoping that he would at least go use his ship as well as serve as the military captain. Now, you might be asking, what on earth would they need a military captain for? They're just a bunch of settlers going to the new land. But remember, the Spanish are already there, and they're not sure exactly who they're going to meet along the way. And so they want that protection just in case they do encounter something that they weren't expecting on their journey. Well, the only way that they were going to receive the charter from the Virginia Company was if they agreed to work as indentured servants. They didn't have the money to pay for this, and so they became indentured servants. They had to agree to that. So what exactly is an indentured servant? Something you might have heard before in your world history classes. It's not slavery, okay? It's where you're going to work for a cause for a certain amount of years than to get something in return. So in this case, if they want the land, they want it to be theirs and for them to own it, they're going to have to work for the Virginia Company for a certain amount of time, all right, as a servant before they're allowed to do that. And so it's kind of like working off a debt that you might owe if you were to buy something in today's terms. Well, the story now goes to probably what you've heard before. You know that the Pilgrims set sail on the Mayflower, okay, which was Myles Standish's ship. They set sail for where they were supposed to go, obviously Virginia, all right, hence the Virginia Company. But a storm came a brewing and kind of knocked their ship around so much that they weren't even sure where they were at. And so as they continued to move to the west, they're going to land in North America, or what we know as the New World, but it wasn't in Virginia. They couldn't find Jamestown. They didn't see anything. The area in which they were was pretty deserted, nothing around. And the biggest thing that they noticed was the climate difference. They were expecting a warmer climate. They actually, were in the Northeast now because they're going to be landing, all right, in the city, or what we know as the state today of Massachusetts. Now, what would you do? What would be the first thing you'd want to do when you set up a new settlement or to hit land? Well, the first thing you're going to do is obviously find water, find food, find shelter, build shelter. But that's not what these separatists decided to do. They're going to go back and look at the failures of Jamestown and Roanoke Island and say, look, the reason why they didn't succeed is because they didn't have a set of laws. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. And so the first thing these people do when they get off the ship, or actually before they get off the ship, is they're going to create the Mayflower Compact. All right, as you can see here on the screen, it's the first declaration of the principles of American freedom. They're literally going to sit down, write some principal rules that everyone in the settlement, everyone in this colony is going to have to follow. They all sign it, including Myles Standish, and they agree that this becomes the first set of laws. What is so great about the Mayflower Compact is that we use it to build what we know as our United States Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution. There are principles that we pull from this compact that we still use today in our American law system. And so that's why this is so important, why the Pilgrims were so important to American history. All right, so it was going to benefit the whole settlement because they understood that, look at Jamestown, look at Roanoke Island. They didn't succeed because of all the issues that they had without having any laws. What you see here is just a picture of them signing the Mayflower Compact. You can see the dress of some of the early settlers is probably what you could think of. You got the hats, and we are used to seeing the buckles on the hats. Don't really know if that really occurred or not. You can see the women here as well. And so it was an eclectic group of people who were going to set up this settlement. Now, one of the first things that happens when they get off, remember, we are building our nation, building this new world solely on the foundation of religion. Most of the people who came over here at the beginning were looking for religious freedom, especially the Separatists. And so one of the first things they're going to do when they get off the ship is they're going to pray. They're going to pray about the fact how they got here safely. Even though they had some struggles along their journey, they were able to get here safely, and now they've arrived. And so you can see them here kneeling and praying. Some of them look like they were sick. Again, remember, a lot of these people had never traveled before, so they would have gotten seasick or maybe got some disease along the way that they would have to deal with. And so it wasn't an easy journey for these Separatists once they arrived, or went on their way, and of course once they arrived to the New World. They're going to name their new settlement Plymouth. All right, we know that from Plymouth Rock. You've heard that before in your elementary classes and middle school classes, I'm sure. Now, what is different between the Pilgrims and the people of Jamestown, or the Separatists? Well, actually nothing, because to be honest with you, just like those in Jamestown, over half of the settlers are going to die during the first winter. Now remember, most of them had not been used to this type of climate. It gets extremely, extremely bad in the wintertime in Massachusetts and the Northeast of our great country today, and it was no different back then. And of course, some of them might not have had the proper clothing with them, didn't know how to grow things in a time where you can't grow a lot of crops and things, so a lot of them might have died of hunger. And so it was a major issue. And just like Jamestown, the people of the Pilgrims, or the people here in Plymouth, are going to actually have to be saved as well. And wouldn't you know it, just like Jamestown with Pocahontas, the Indians are going to come to the aid of the white man once again. All right, Samoset and Squanto, two Native Americans, are actually going to teach these Pilgrims the way to survive here in the Northeast. They taught them how to farm, how to trap animals, what to use those animals for, not just for the food, but use the pelt and use the fur to make clothes into things that they were able to keep warm, and so they would be able to survive the harsh winters of the Northeast. Of course, to finish out here today, I want to talk a little bit about what we think comes out of this, of course, as the big Thanksgiving feast that took place between the Pilgrims and the Native Americans as they celebrated the fact that they were able to survive. They're praying, they're thanking the Indians. They even, according to a lot of documents, asked the Indians to join them for a feast. Now, again, a lot of the feast food would have come from the Indians, a lot of corn-type meals, all right, a drink called spirit that came from the Indians, and there were a lot of things, as you can see here. You'll notice that a lot of the women are not sitting at the table. A lot of them are outside of the table in this picture. Of course, we'll talk more about that in class of how men were completely different than the women in regards to what they were allowed to do, the things that they were allowed to say, how they were involved in worship and things like that. And so that'll about wrap up our this lesson today on the Pilgrims. Just a real short, in-depth look about who these people really were. Just know that when I'm talking about the Separatists, that the Separatists and the Pilgrims are the exact same thing. But they are a completely different group than those who came to Jamestown. And we're also going to be talking about the Puritans in our next episode, and they are completely different than the Puritans. And so that'll about wrap it up, and hope you enjoyed this lesson. And as always, okay, I hope you kind of continue really writing these things down, getting these things in your head, because I want to make sure that you understand everything that you need to know for the lessons going forward. Well, again, that'll wrap this episode up here. What have we learned today? Well, number one, we understand that the Pilgrims were separatists, that they left, all right, England, the Church of England, and moved to Holland. They hired a man by the name of Myles Standish. Number two, they're going to sail to the New World with Myles Standish. They agreed with the charter to become indentured servants, that they're going to work for a certain amount of time. In this case, they were going to work 7 years to be able to gain that land here in the New World. Then number three, once they got here, we know that they struggled, that over half of them died in the first winter, and they would have to be saved by the Indians, just like those people of Jamestown. And so, again, hope you learned a lot today. Until next time, you have to click on my page and watch one of my great videos. From everyone here at the castle, good night.